Okay everyone, so this is going to be a demo video for your Impasto painting project. And we're going to discuss how to create a bit of texture using your paintbrushes and using your palette knife. All right, so I've got a canvas here. You can see I've just very quickly sketched out this flower and leaf bunch that I see in front of me. And we're just going to go ahead and see if we can get some of this in and just talk about some of the mark making approaches that you might use. Okay. So I'm just gonna grab a brush that I feel comfortable with. For me, I really love working with filberts. I'm going to get some of the information in this piece that's not the most important information in this piece. The way that you approach making an impasto style painting, you are going to consider what aspects of this flower bunch, what you're looking at, what you think could use more texture, and what you think fades into the background a little bit more. So for me, I would say that the stalk, the stem, that's a little bit less important, in my opinion, than some of these leaves that are coming forward. The flower up here, even this area of the stem versus this area up here, I feel that this should be a little more smooth, a little less noticeable than this. And then additionally, looking at the leaves themselves, this leaf back here versus this leaf up here, I think that the one in the foreground should have a little more texture. All right, so let's go ahead and see if we can get some of this. So I've just got a selection of colors that I personally enjoy using. For this, the palette is not quite as important. We're focusing more on texture. All right, so I'm making a nice thin mix, and this is going to be for the stem. All right, okay, I feel pretty good about that. I think that that's a pretty close match. All right. Okay. So we've got some of this information in. It's not too detailed right now. You see here, this information, I'm leaving it pretty smooth because I don't think that needs to be super textured. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look at some of these leaves. All right. And this is where we're going to start getting kind of textural with our paint. And I'm a notorious, I mix a lot with my paintbrush, which, as you know, you should really mix with your palette knife. It will keep your brushes in better shape for longer. All right, I've got 2 shades of green here. A darker shade and a lighter shade. Let's start taking a look at some of this. All right, so nothing too crazy just yet. That's all pretty smooth, right? And you know, you could go in and add some more detail if you want to. If I were doing this to a complete painting, I would go in and add a lot more subtle shading, more highlights, and get some of the, some more information about the leaf. We can kind of nod at it with just a couple of small touches here. But we want to get to the impasto, so let's take a look at that. Okay, so now we're gonna look at this leaf right here. And I think that this one is going to use a lot more texture because that is really coming towards us. So let's see. Take the palette knife. Let's get some green going. You know, make sure your paint is thoroughly mixed. You don't want to have a bunch of streakiness, in your piece, unless it's intentional streakiness. And that's something you really need to plan. All right, I'm gonna wipe that off so we have a nice clean palette knife. And let's go ahead and see what we can do here. Okay. All right, so mark number one, you see how that's coming really far up off of the canvas and how that makes that leaf already start to feel like it's coming towards us. Okay, so that's a good start. Let's go ahead and see what else we can do with this. And remember your color mixing and your color matching. You know, each mark you make is going to be slightly different. Whether a slight change in hue, a slight change in value, maybe the color temperature shifts slightly. There are a lot of highlights, midtones, and shadows in every object you look at. And if you want to be a really good painter, you should pay attention to those shifts. All right. There we go. So let's see what we can do here. Take that paint. I think there's a shadow that I can see here. I want to catch that just a little bit. Okay. Now let's see if we can get this side up here. It's more yellow. And it's also lighter, so I'm gonna add some white. Okay. For that, I decided to just go all the way down. And now I'm gonna think a little bit about how I can enhance this with some brushwork, because I think that down here, we're getting closer to the base, closer to these other leaves. I think it would be interesting to see what texture we can get with the brush instead of the palette. The reason I'm wiping my palette knife before I go back to pick up the paint is because I don't want a ton of paint lower down on the knife that's going to kind of drag out into sections that we're not interested in painting. Okay, let's try this. All right, so we got a lot of ground covered here. You guys see the texture in that paint as a result of working with your palette knife and applying paint very liberally with a paintbrush. So, I want you to play around with this in your project. I want you to really explore how you can make different impasto paint marks. And remember, you don't want the entire painting to be impasto paint marks. It will help your painting, make it stronger, if there are areas that come forward and areas that fall back. So think about a visual hierarchy in your image. And I would say you want about 50% of your painting perhaps to include this impasto style of mark making.